Here's what nobody tells you about the average American's finances. The median household brings in $54,000 a year. That same household spends $73,000 annually. You caught that, right? Spending exceeds income by $19,000 every single year. 28% of Americans have exactly $0 saved for retirement. Not a small amount. Zero. The average person retiring today has $87,000 in their 401k. Using the standard 4% withdrawal rule, that gives them $7,000 per year to live on. That's $583 per month. And here's the part that should terrify you. Most people think they're doing fine because everyone around them appears to be doing fine too. So here's my question. When did we all agree that financial disaster in slow motion counts as normal? I'm going to show you exactly how the average American's financial life actually works, why the math doesn't just fail, but catastrophically implodes, and what specific psychological traps keep intelligent people locked in this system. Because here's the thing, this isn't about being stupid with money. The average person isn't an idiot. They're responding rationally to a set of incentives that guarantee failure. By the way, I built a free early retirement calculator because most online ones are mathematically wrong. It uses BlackRock and Vanguard logic to expose the weak points in your plan, and I only ask for your email to send the report, so I don't store any of your financial data. Link in the description. Think of the average American's financial life as a bathtub. Water flowing in from the faucet represents income. Water draining out represents spending. Most people focus obsessively on the faucet. They want raises, promotions, side hustles, more water, but nobody's watching the drain. And here's what makes this metaphor perfect. The drain isn't just open. Someone keeps making it bigger. Every year, the drain hole gets wider. Lifestyle inflation, subscription creep, the endless drip of expenses that feel small individually but compound into financial ruin. Let me start with what should be an encouraging number. The median individual income in America right now is $54,000 per year. That's roughly $4,100 per month before taxes, or about $26 per hour if you're working full time. Now, the Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes this data, and it's actually gone up in recent years. Wages have increased, everyone's celebrating, more water flowing into the bathtub. Here's what actually happens to that money. Federal income tax takes its cut. State tax takes its slice. Social Security grabs 6.2%. Medicare takes another 1.45%. By the time that $54,000 actually hits your bank account, you're looking at somewhere between $38,000 and $43,000, depending on your state. Let's be generous and call it $40,000 of actual take-home pay. That's $3,300 per month you can actually spend. Now here's where the bathtub metaphor becomes useful. Remember that drain? The average American household spends $73,000 per year. That's just over $6,000 per month. You see the problem immediately. The average household needs $6,000 monthly to maintain their current lifestyle, but the average individual only brings home $3,300 after taxes. How is anyone covering this gap? They're not. That's the point. The bathtub is overflowing, and people are pretending the bathroom isn't flooding. Some households have two incomes, which helps, but even with two median earners, you're looking at around $80,000 take home combined. That barely covers the $73,000 spending habit with nothing left over for saving, investing, or building actual wealth. Let me break down where that $73,000 actually goes, because this is where the drain gets interesting. Housing eats $24,000 per year. That's $2,025 monthly for rent or mortgage. Property taxes, insurance, utilities, maintenance, everything it takes to keep the lights on. If you live in any coastal city, you're laughing at that number because it won't even get you a studio apartment. But this is the national average, which means millions of people are spending far more. Food takes another $9,000 annually. That's $750 per month for groceries and restaurants combined. Transportation costs $12,000 per year. Car payments, insurance, gas, maintenance, or if you're in a major city, public transit passes. That's nearly $1,000 monthly just to move your body from place to place. Here's a fun one. The average American spends about $1,800 per year on entertainment and recreation. That's $150 per month. Streaming services, going out, hobbies, whatever keeps you sane. Healthcare, even with insurance, runs about $4,500 annually out of pocket. That's another $375 per month. Add it all up and you get $73,000. The drain is wide open and everything's flowing out faster than it flows in. Now you're probably thinking, okay, but what about retirement savings? Surely people are at least putting something away for the future. This is where the story gets properly dystopian. The median retirement account balance across all Americans is $87,000. Let me say that differently. Half of all Americans have less than $87,000 saved for retirement. And that includes people in their 60s who are about to retire. 28% have literally nothing, $0. They're planning to live entirely on Social Security, which currently pays an average of $1,920 per month. That's $23,000 per year. Let's look at retirement savings by age, because the breakdown is somehow worse. If you're under 25, the median balance is less than $3,000. Okay, fine. You're young. Between 25 and 34, $18,000. Still early, but alarming. 35 to 44 years old, $45,000 saved. You're supposedly in your peak earning years and you have $45,000. 45 to 54, the median is $115,000. 55 to 64, it's $185,000. And for people 65 and older, the median retirement balance is around $200,000. Stop and think about that last number, $200,000. That's what the typical American has when they retire. Let's do the math on what that actually buys you. Financial advisors use something called the 4% rule. You can safely withdraw 4% of your portfolio annually without running out of money. 4% of $200,000 is $8,000 per year. That's $667 per month. Can you live on $667 per month? Even if you own your home outright with no mortgage, that barely covers property taxes, utilities, food, and healthcare. And we haven't even talked about inflation, which is currently running hot, or the fact that healthcare costs explode as you age. The average person over 65 spends nearly $7,000 annually out of pocket on medical care alone. So your $8,000 annual withdrawal is almost entirely consumed by healthcare before you've bought a single gallon of milk. This is why you see 70-year-olds working at Walmart. Not because they love greeting customers, because they have no choice. The math doesn't work. Here's where it gets really interesting. Most people have no idea they're in this position until it's too late. There's a guy I know who ran a small construction business for 30 years, made decent money, not rich, but solid middle class. Never really thought about retirement because he figured he'd just sell the business when he was ready to stop working. In his mind, the business was his retirement plan. Two things happened. First, when he tried to sell, he discovered the business wasn't worth what he thought. Most small businesses are basically jobs that the owner has created for themselves. Without him, there was no business. No buyer wanted it. Second, his body gave out before he was ready to retire. Back problems, knee problems, the accumulated wear of 30 years of physical work. He ended up closing the business at 62 and going on Social Security early, which permanently reduced his monthly benefit. He now lives on about $1,400 per month from Social Security. His wife never worked much because they had kids and made the traditional choice for her to stay home. She gets spousal benefits of about $700 monthly. Together, they have $2,100 per month to live on. They own their home, which helps, but property taxes are $3,000 annually. Insurance is another $1,800. That's $4,800 per year in fixed costs just to keep the house. That leaves them with about $20,000 annually for everything else. They're not starving, but they're also not living anything close to the retirement they imagined. No travel, no restaurants, no helping their grandkids with college. They're surviving, not living. That's one case study. But the pattern repeats millions of times with minor variations. Now let's talk about debt, because this is where the bathtub metaphor really breaks down. It's not just that the drain is too big. Someone's actively pumping water out of the tub faster than physics should allow. The average American household carries $140,000 in total debt. Let me break that down. $236,000 in mortgage debt for homeowners. Now, mortgage debt isn't necessarily bad. You're building equity in an asset that typically appreciates. That's actually the one form of debt that makes sense if you can afford the payments. But here's the ugly part. $7,200 in credit card debt at an average interest rate of 22%. Do the math. That's $1,584 per year paid purely in interest. Money that disappears into thin air, buying nothing, building nothing, just servicing the cost of past consumption that you've already forgotten about. $28,000 in auto loans. We're financing depreciating assets at 6 to 8% interest. Think about how insane that is. The car loses 15 to 20% of its value the moment you drive it off the lot. Then it continues depreciating every year, but you're paying interest on top of that depreciation. You're losing money twice, once from the asset declining in value and again from the interest charge. $38,000 in student loans. People are still paying these off into their 40s and 50s. I've seen people who are 50 years old making student loan payments for degrees they got 3 decades ago. The degree might have helped them get a job, but the debt has followed them their entire working life. Here's the brutal truth. If you're paying 22% interest on credit card debt, there's no investment strategy in the world that reliably beats that return. Not real estate, not stocks, not crypto, nothing. The single best investment you can make is paying off that debt, but most people don't. They make minimum payments while simultaneously trying to invest in their 401k because some financial advisor told them to start saving for retirement early. That's like bailing water out of a sinking boat with a teaspoon while ignoring the gaping hole in the hull. Fix the hole first. Speaking of comedic financial decisions, I love when people tell me they're saving money by buying something on sale. I saved $80. No, you spent $320. The item costs $400 normally. You paid $320. That's not saving. That's just spending less than the maximum possible amount. Saving would be keeping the $320 in your bank account. Now let's talk about the number that actually matters. Net worth. This is your financial score. Everything you own minus everything you owe. That's it. That's the number that determines whether you're winning or losing the money game. The median net worth for American households is $192,000. But this number is wildly skewed by age. Under 35 years old, the median net worth is $39,000. Think about that. You're 34 years old. You've been working for maybe 12 years since college. Your total net worth is $39,000. That means if you sold everything you own, paid off all your debts, you'd have $39,000 cash. Is that good? No. That's catastrophically behind where you need to be. You've got 30 years until retirement and you're starting with $39,000. Even if you invest aggressively and get 8% annual returns, which is optimistic, you'd need to save about $1,500 per month just to hit $1.5 million by retirement. But remember, the average person brings home $3,300 monthly and spends over $6,000. Where's the $1,500 coming from? Between 35 and 44, median net worth jumps to $135,000. 45 to 54, it's $247,000. 55 to 64, $364,000. 65 to 74, $410,000. That final number deserves attention. $410,000 at age 70. That sounds decent until you realize it includes home equity. If you own a house worth $300,000 with no mortgage, that's $300,000 of your $410,000 total. You're left with $110,000 in actual liquid assets to fund potentially 20 or 30 years of retirement. The 4% rule on $110,000 gives you $4,400 annually, $367 per month. Add in Social Security of roughly $2,000 monthly, and you've got $28,000 per year total. Again, not destitute, but nowhere near comfortable. Here's what fascinates me. Most people never calculate their net worth, not once in their entire lives. They have no idea where they stand. They're playing a game without looking at the score. They know their salary, they know their credit card balance, sort of, but they've never sat down and added up everything they own, subtracted everything they owe, and looked at the final number. Why? Because looking at that number would force them to confront reality. And reality, for most people, is uncomfortable. There's a number that explains everything I've just described. The average American saves 3.8% of their income, not 15%, which is the minimum you should save for retirement, not 20%, which is what you need if you want to retire early. 3.8%, if you're earning $54,000 and saving 3.8%, that's $2,052 per year, $171 per month. At that rate, saving a $5,000 emergency fund takes almost 3 years. A $20,000 car down payment takes 10 years. A $60,000 house down payment takes 30 years. This is why people feel like they're constantly on the edge of financial disaster. Because they are. 3.8% savings rate means you're one surprise expense away from going into debt. One medical emergency. One car repair. One job loss. Anything unexpected destroys you because there's no cushion. Financial experts recommend saving 15 to 20% minimum. That's 4 to 5 times more than what the average person actually saves. The gap between what people should do and what they actually do is enormous, and that gap compounds over decades into the retirement crisis I described earlier. Here's another fun stat. The average credit score in America is 717. That's actually pretty good. Credit scores range from 300 to 850, so 717 is solidly in the good range. This tells you something important. Most people are at least paying their bills on time and managing credit reasonably well on a surface level. But here's what a good credit score doesn't tell you. It doesn't tell you if someone's drowning in debt. It doesn't tell you if they're living paycheck to paycheck. It doesn't tell you if they have any savings. You can have a 750 credit score and $0 in your retirement account. The score just means you're reliably making your minimum payments. Your credit score affects almost everything in your financial life. Mortgage rates. A 1% difference in interest rate on a $300,000 mortgage costs you over $60,000 in additional interest over 30 years. Car loan rates, credit card approval and rates, apartment rental applications. Some employers even check credit scores. It touches everything. The formula for a good credit score isn't complicated. Pay your bills on time. Keep credit card balances below 30% of your limit. Don't open too many new accounts at once. Maintain a mix of different credit types. That's it. Follow those rules and your score takes care of itself. But notice what's missing from that formula. Savings, investments, net worth, retirement planning. None of that matters to your credit score. You can be financially successful with a mediocre credit score. You can be financially destroyed with a perfect credit score. The score measures your reliability as a borrower, not your financial health. Let me tell you about another person, guy I knew from my business days. Earned about $90,000 per year. Good income. Not rich, but well above median. Had a credit score around 780. Owned a nice house, drove a nice car, looked successful from the outside. He had zero savings. Literally nothing in his 401k beyond what his employer automatically contributed. Carried about $15,000 in credit card debt across multiple cards. Had a car payment of $650 monthly for a truck he absolutely didn't need but wanted. His mortgage payment was $2,800 per month on a house that was, frankly, too big for just him and his wife. He made $90,000. After taxes, that's probably $68,000 take home. His fixed costs were over $55,000 annually. Housing, car payment, insurance, utilities, minimum credit card payments, food. He had maybe $13,000 per year of discretionary income, and he spent all of it. Restaurants, golf, hunting trips, the latest iPhone every year. At 46 years old, his net worth was approximately negative $5,000. The equity in his house was offset by his credit card debt and car loan. He was worth nothing. Worse than nothing. And he had no idea he was in trouble because his credit score was good and his neighbors all lived the same way. That's the invisible crisis. People who look fine, who have good jobs and nice stuff, but who are completely unprepared for retirement or any financial emergency. Pull all this together and here's what the complete picture looks like. The average person earns $54,000 but takes home about $40,000 after taxes. They spend $73,000 per year, which is physically impossible without either having two incomes or going into debt. They save 3.8% of their income, which is catastrophically insufficient. They have $87,000 saved for retirement, which won't cover more than a decade of basic living expenses. They carry $7,200 in credit card debt at 22% interest, actively destroying their financial future. They have a net worth of $192,000, mostly from home equity if they're older, which isn't liquid and doesn't produce income. They plan to retire around 64 with minimal savings and will rely heavily on Social Security, which pays an average of $23,000 per year. Does this sound like a recipe for financial success? It's not. It's a slow-motion train wreck. This is why understanding these numbers matters so much. Once you know what average looks like, it becomes crystal clear that average is terrible. Average means stressed about money. Average means living paycheck to paycheck. Average means hoping nothing goes wrong. That's not a goal. That's a nightmare. But here's the actually good news. Beating average doesn't require genius. It just requires being more intentional than most people. The bar is incredibly low. I spent 20 plus years running my own business. I was surrounded by accountants and fiscal lawyers who showed me how money actually moves. Not theory, not what some guru says on YouTube. How it actually works in the real world. I'm retired now with a few $1,000,000 invested in the stock market. Not because I'm smarter than everyone else. Because I paid attention to the numbers and made different choices than the average person. Don't work for money. Own the companies that do. That's the fundamental shift in thinking that separates people who build wealth from people who stay average. Employees trade time for money. Owners collect returns on capital. The wealthy own assets that produce income. The average person owns liabilities that produce expenses. Here's what you need to do if you want to beat average. 3 specific actions, not generic advice. First, increase your savings rate to at least 15% immediately. Not eventually, not when you get a raise. Now, cut something, cancel subscriptions, move to a cheaper apartment. Stop eating out as much. Find the money. If the average person saves 3.8% and you save 15%, you're saving 4 times more. That compounds into millions of dollars over decades. This is the single most important number in your financial life. Second, eliminate high interest debt with extreme prejudice. Every dollar you pay in credit card interest is a dollar that can never compound in your favor. Make minimum payments on everything except your highest interest debt. Throw everything extra at that debt until it's gone. Then attack the next highest rate. Keep going until you're debt-free except for your mortgage. This isn't sexy. Nobody makes motivational videos about paying off credit cards. But this is how you actually build wealth. Third, invest in index funds, not individual stocks, not crypto, not whatever your brother-in-law is excited about this month. Low-cost index funds that track the S&P 500 or total market. Historically, they return 7 to 10% annually. The difference between keeping money in a savings account at 0.5% and investing it at 8% is the difference between dying broke and retiring comfortably. That's not hyperbole. Run the math. It's shocking. The average person's approach to money doesn't work. The numbers prove it. When most people have less than $90,000 saved for retirement, are carrying thousands in high interest debt, and are saving less than 4% annually, something is fundamentally broken. But you don't have to be average. You control this. You choose your savings rate, you choose your spending, you choose your debt level, you choose your financial future. These statistics show us where average ends up. You get to decide if you want to join them or do something different. Most people watching this video won't change anything. They'll nod along, feel temporarily motivated, then go back to spending $6,000 per month they don't have. But some of you will actually calculate your net worth tonight. Some of you will look at your savings rate and realize it's embarrassingly low. Some of you will make different choices. That's the group that wins. Not because they're smarter, because they paid attention to the math and adjusted their behavior accordingly. That's it. That's the entire secret. Know the numbers. Act on the numbers. Repeat for decades.